What is Reclaim the Algorithm? Welcome to the first Reclaim the Algorithm web series. And the basic idea is everybody that you see here today, like you saw the title about W.E.B. Du Bois and what we can learn about from what he was doing over 120 years ago in data science, in data visualization, what applies today. So we're going to get a deep historical lesson around what he was doing and how the methods and the things that the standards that he was using are higher than a lot of what you see in a whole lot of machine learning and AI algorithms. But to go up a little bit higher and talk about what reclaim the algorithm means, I just want to highlight that Dr. Emery here, Dr. Brandeis Marshall, Allen Hillery, Anthony Starks, and myself, everybody on this stage are people who are excited about the promise of technology. We have authors on topics in machine learning on here. We have people that are celebrating data visualization and things like that. But we're not excited by the narrative that all these things are developed for getting people to engage and click things online, to sell advertisements, or chat bots that get people into loops and spirals that hurt their mental health and also hurt and dull their mental agility. So the idea behind Reclaim the Algorithm is because, like, I feel like a lot of people who, when they stand up and they say things that are critical of these technologies, they get labeled as Luddites and told that they'll be left behind. But we want to raise those criticisms. I work in healthcare data science. We can't afford to not have higher standards and goals when it comes to technologies that are touching people's healthcare lives and mental health. So you're going to hear multiple angles. Allen Hillery and Anthony Starks, they co-lead the W.E.B. Du Bois challenge, and they're going to be they're going to be framing up that historical context and giving us honestly, I'm very new to the history of Du Bois in data science and all that, and I can't wait to hear their deeply informed perspectives. Then Dr. Brandeis Marshall, I've got two of her books right by me. One of them is Mitigating Bias in Machine Learning. The other is Data Consciousness. That's upstairs. Okay, that's right there. Okay, we see it on the screen. So she's going to take it, but because her work is in directly working with these companies, like people that are employing algorithms and going through with algorithmic strategies, she's going to take the W.E.B. Du Bois framing and talk about, well, what does that imply from a modern context? And of course, fabulous, wonderful co-host, Dr. Emery, going to help kick things off as well. But I am running out of time. I ramble too much, but I'm running out of time because I want to do something else, is to celebrate our community partners. So let me share the screen and talk about why this is important. So the community partnership, that is just different organizations that have made a commitment to getting the word out about the Reclaim the Algorithm series. So as we come out with more topics and materials, we have Beta NYC, the NAACP, that is such a big point of pride because Du Bois is one of the founding members, and we'll be talking about their roots in data science. Spark, which is an extension of Boston University that engages students in public-facing data science projects and public goods works, and of course Data Ed X Group, that is Dr. Brandeis's company, so she's naturally a community partner. And Modular Feedback, I mean, that's my motto. Yeah, no secret that's the company that I run for healthcare data science. At the end of the webinar, if you are part of an institution that you believe would be proud to share messages like this about engagement in the future of AI and machine learning, we invite you to join us as community partners. This is just the beginning. We want to kind of convene with y'all and convene with the audience as well on topics and things to speak about and bring up. With that, just a couple of the run of show is we're going to start with a historical context. We're then going to transition into Dr. Brandeis and talking about modern issues, and then we'll have the full panel available as a whole. We want the chat going. We know that there's a lot of people that signed up. We're proud to have over 200 people that have registered. So let yourself be known. If there is anything that is of interest, anything that resonates with you, let our panelists know. They're going to enjoy seeing that. But we just want to put some energy around this reclaim the algorithm concept, and whatever way you can connect with each other. Like if even in the chat, for people that aren't speaking, if you like what they're saying, let's use this as a way to connect with other like-minded folks. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kara to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for being here. I'm so excited to transition us into this first part of the conversation. I just wanted to bring up a recent experience that Chris and I and some friends had. We visited the Printing Black America exhibit at the Brooklyn Public Library Central Branch a couple weeks ago, which presented a trans-historical project that portrays aspects of Black life in the 21st century and reinterprets and responds to the data visualizations innovated by W.E.B. Du Bois, which we'll talk about today. I'd like to share a quote from that exhibit by transdisciplinary artist Stephanie Dinkins that I think sets the scene for what we'll discuss today. Knowledge is never neutral. It is entangled within institutions, funding, and classification systems that decide what counts. The data portraits presented in this exhibition reveal this entanglement. They are arguments about who gets counted, who decides, and who defines what it means to matter. This exhibit and the work of W.E.B. Du Bois and our panelists today fill me with hope for what data science and storytelling can be when it's used for good. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Allen Hillery and Anthony Starks to share their work.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to talk to you about Du Bois and the power of storytelling. I'm going to tell you a lot, give you a lot of background, tell you the story of W.E.B. Du Bois and his journey of using data and the power of data storytelling. You can see here's Du Bois in Paris in 1900. This is the venue. And here are some of the visualizations from that story. But let's begin at Fisk University in 1985, when Du Bois started there. This is something from a letter that he wrote to his pastor. Some mornings, as I look upon the 200 or 300 of my companions assembled for morning prayers, I can hardly realize they are all my people. That this great assembly of youth and intelligence are representative of a race which 20 years ago was in bondage. I'd like for you to think about that notion of progress from slavery to, in his case, intelligence. Let's fast forward a few years. Du Bois is now embarked upon something called the Philadelphia Negro. And this was an inquiry that was commissioned by some people in Philadelphia. In his words, this inquiry extended over a period of 15 months and sought to ascertain something of the geographical distribution of this race, their organizations, and above all, their relation to their million white fellow citizens. The thing that I want to point out here is the notion of using data and getting out and gathering that data to present facts, to present things that in many ways refuted what was the common notions of the day, and to really understand why people are the way they are. You can see the table there on the right, the chart of and the map. All right, this is presaging something that's going to happen a few years later. So just put a pin in that and thinking of, and this is in many ways a landmark sociological study that Du Bois embarked upon. So in 1900, we have this fellow, Thomas J. Calloway, who was also an alumni with Du Bois in Fisk. So these are two Fisk guys. In 1900, there was an exposition for the world. It's called the Universal Paris Exposition. Thomas J. Calloway was commissioned to create a portion of that exposition to tell the world the story of Black progress at that time. 1900 is only 35 years after emancipation. Du Bois worked with also students at Atlanta University, and I always love to show these photographs to show you what the people look like who Du Bois worked with. On the left, you have the Atlanta University debating team circa 1900, and the women seated on the steps of Atlanta University. This picture is actually part of the 1900 exposition. Here's Calloway's letter to the Black leaders at the time. Thousands upon thousands will go to that fair, and a well-selected and prepared exhibit representing the Negro's development in his churches, his schools, his homes, his farms, his stores, his professions, and pursuits in general will attract attention and do a great and lasting good in convincing thinking people of the possibilities of the Negro. I want to point out here, intent is really, really important. And I'll talk about that a little later. But he had an idea that he wanted to show the world, on the world stage, how far Black people had come. On the left, you'll see the poster for the Paris Exposition in 1900. In the middle, you'll see a zoomed out view of Paris. And then on the right, you see the little corner of the exposition called the Exposition of the American Negro. This is where the visualizations were shown, but also over 500 photographs, books, publications to really show the world where we've been and how far we've come. But before I do that, I always like to give a historical context. What was going on around 1900? So let's start 5 years prior to that in 1895. During the summer of 1895, in a Brooklyn park, there was a cotton plantation complete with 500 Black workers reenacting slavery. The show was called Black America, 1895. The next year, 1896, the Supreme Court handed down the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling that upheld the constitutionality of racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. As I mentioned before, in 1897, the Philadelphia Negro began, where he embarked upon the inquiry to really ask and answer questions about a particular population, a landmark sociological study that used charts and graphs and data. The next year, in 1898, the duly elected people in Wilmington, North Carolina, was violently overthrown. The coup occurred after the state's white Southern Democrats conspired and led a mob of 2,000 white men to overthrow the legitimately elected fusionist government. They expelled opposition Black and white leaders from the city, destroyed property and businesses that had been built up since the Civil War, including the only Black newspaper, and killed an estimated 60 and up to 300 people. In 1898, 27 Georgians were lynched, including the horrific lynching of Sam Hose in April of that year. Between 1890 and 1900, Georgia averaged more than one mob killing per year. And that leads us to the Paris Exposition. I talked about intent before, and this is a screenshot from the original document that Thomas Calloway reported back to the Commissioner General of the United States of the International Universal Exposition in Paris. He had 10 goals, and I really want to impress upon you this notion of having an intent and a plan for what you want to show. His 10 things were something of the Negro's history, education of the race, effects of education upon illiteracy, effects of education upon occupation, effects of education upon property, the Negro's mental development as shown by the books, high-class pamphlets, newspapers, and other periodicals written or edited by members of the race. Number 7, his mechanical genius as shown by patents granted to American Negroes. Number 8, business and industrial development in general. Number 9, what the Negro is doing for himself through his own separate church organizations, particularly in the work of education. And 10, a general sociological study of the racial conditions of the United States. Given those 10 goals, what I've done is I've sort of picked and chosen some of the visualizations from that time that highlight these particular points. And we'll go through each of them in a little bit of detail, just so that you can understand how well that he picked and how well did he actually meet those particular goals. The other thing I really want to point out when I talk about these things is how these were crafted. These were crafted by hand, of course, by both Du Bois and his team at Atlanta University. So this first visual, something of the Negro's history. This is the first visual that was actually in the story. It talks about the Georgia Negro, and it shows the two hemispheres, and it also shows the transatlantic slave routes. And there, if you zoom in closely, there's a star of Georgia, which is actually one of the focuses of the particular exposition. In this case, one thing that's notable of this one is the quote, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." Here, he talks about, in many of those goals, he talks about education many, many times and the importance of education. Here, the Negro enrolled in public schools, and you can see from 1887 all the way down to 180,565. Progress. Education's effect upon illiteracy. This is an interesting chart that shows that. And one of the things I really want to point out is many of the charts that you'll see here they look conventional. They look like they could be done nowadays with Excel or Tableau or something, but many use very unconventional and innovative ways to show the data. In this case, he's showing illiteracy decreasing from 99% to 50%. This is one of my favorite charts, and you can see a copy of it behind me. And this shows the effects of education upon occupation. This is showing two populations, Negroes at the top, whites at the bottom, and their proportions of what occupations, what do they do? You can see the two red ones are agricultural and fisheries. America was still an agrarian society, and you can see it 68 and 62% were almost the same between those two populations. But one thing I always like to point out is the yellow wedge, domestic and personal service. 28% for blacks and 55%, much less for whites. So you can see in this one chart the various levels of occupations, especially amongst professions, 4%, and then very less than 1%. This is one that's very interesting to do with today's data, and I've done that particular as well. And that's something that we'll talk about when we go and we talk about the Du Bois challenge, how we can move modern data into that. Here's the effect of education upon property. And this is showing the large increase of property values. He talked about in his goals, the Negro's mental development as shown by the books, high-class pamphlets, and newspapers. Here in this pyramid, you can see the grand total of 153 newspapers, from weekly newspapers, magazines, and so forth. Not just visuals, but there were photographs within this exhibit. His mechanical genius is shown by patents granted to the American Negroes. And here we show them working in the machine shop. Business and industrial development is represented by this block diagram, if you will, going from things like bakers and barbers and grocers and building contractors, druggists, publishers. What the Negro is doing for himself, that's self-determination, through his own separate church organizations. This is a photograph of a group of people in front of the church. And all of these data, all of these visuals are on the Library of Congress. And I would encourage you to actually go there and explore this yourself. And then finally, the general sociological study. This particular slide, if you will, talks about professions as well and populations and so forth. One thing you'll note about this one is it's in two languages. It's in English and French, denoting the venue. So all of this, to me, brings down to 3 points that Du Bois was trying to tell in his story. We are here. We're part of the United States. This is who we are, and this is how far we've come. Just a note again on the venue. You can see it's very small, kind of a corner, and you can see things like the statuette of Frederick Douglass and the posters on the walls, and these little flip charts where you can see various artifacts, and the books, of course. And I just sort of pasted in to give a notion of what a user might see as they walk by. They can see the colors. They can see what the exposition was all about. Also want to talk about the scales. These, we tend to work in screens all the time, but in this case, these were large poster size, 28 by 22 inches. And here's the full sort of gamut of those originals. Just to sort of, when seeing them all together shows a great variety in the colors and the design of them. At this point, I'll pass over to Allen.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. I know we're probably at time, so there might be some questions. I can use some time to, for Chris and Kara to address questions, but I'll just quickly open up with, as you can see, that this is very powerful work that Du Bois put together. As I was going to reflect on, his work, and plus I recently also went to the Brooklyn exhibit, Printing Black America. I think about how his work was received, and, I describe Du Bois as a devout academic. I really felt that he really stood by this work. He really thought that this work was going to make a huge impact. I wanted to also, show or play up the fact that he used the tools of his society at the time, meaning that there was a lot of pseudoscience, especially interwoven into statistics. And he was able to use all of those tools to create these data visualizations to show that there was actually progress in Black America versus the theories that was out during that time that the Black race would be extinct, for example, or also the criminalization that was played up as far as the Black community was, as well as healthcare, that part of that extinction was going to be due to the fact that we were at higher risk of dying out early. So again, I don't want to take too much into the second part, but wanted to just round that out as we open it up to questions.
Okay. You want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. So again, I was just playing up, not playing up, but I was also emphasizing again, I had gone to the Printing Black America exhibit, and there was a really powerful essays that were also there in addition to the Martin take on Du Bois's visualizations. So one of the tensions that came up with that I saw that was talked about, we just showed that other slide where Du Bois was contemplating whether he had done enough in terms of the reach that his exhibit in the 1900s had made. So it had me thinking that a lot of times when we are out here doing our work and our careers in our lives, there are moments where we may feel discouraged. And even someone like Du Bois felt discouraged. And he was just wondering if all the knowledge that he had amassed, and he also, one of the essays that was very impactful was taken from one of the chapters in Souls of Black Folks called Of the Coming of John, and where the character John had questioned whether or not, after amassing all this knowledge, could one be happy? And so that had me thinking about the fact that, maybe the tension that Du Bois experienced was being kind of projected into that work, Souls of Black Folk, but also just wondering how he felt, even though the exhibit had received like a gold medal, there was some media coverage, it did not have the impact that he anticipated, in my opinion, that his work would eradicate racism. And so these are some of the things that I grapple with, and that blog post that was shared earlier talks about that, where are we doing enough? And the question I posed in that was, did he do enough? And if we move to the next slide, I think that he did do what he did the best that he can do. And the fact that we're still having conversations around his exhibit, we're having this today, and we just kind of wrapped up the Du Bois Challenge. These are all pointing to the fact that, as long as we're still in conversation, we're doing the best that we can. And it's when conversations stop is where we should be more concerned.
So let me just jump in real quick. For those who don't know, the Du Bois Challenge is where we curate over 10 weeks, 10 of the visuals from 1900, and we challenge the community online to recreate them and talk about them. So what we wanted to share real quick is some of the notable versions and things that we've seen over the challenge since we've been doing this since 2021. So this is from Icaro Bernardes, who is from Brazil. And you can see that, again, we do it over 10 weeks. And he has recreated 10 visuals, again, using data from his own country and variations on the theme and ways that he's done it. For example, here is his version of the illiteracy chart that I just showed. Here's his version of the first one. Okay.
So we're getting an overwhelming amount of questions from the audience and all that.
Okay.
And sadly, we only have time for one.
Okay.
But I think that this is a very relevant one that honestly very relevant to the conversation that we were having ahead of this is related to the Voting Rights Act, that recent ruling, and it comes from Debananj Roy Choudhury. And my question is regarding the most recent ruling in the Voting Rights Act. What should we take from Du Bois's teachings in order to best make sense of what's going on in our country around voting rights, especially when it comes to map making and redistricting? How do we spread education among our communities about how important this is? And I think that this is an important and relevant question because it's related to the when you put on these challenges, people bring up issues that are focused on their concerns. We're hearing and seeing data projects developed by their communities. So just wanted to get your reaction to that before we move on to the next section.
So from my perspective, again, I noted the Plessy versus Ferguson is another case where the Supreme Court did something that is questionable at this point. But my answer to that is don't stop. Continue to, show the data. Don't be afraid to use unconventional means. All of the tools that are in front of you. Du Bois used that particular venue to tell that particular story. We can do that again with social media. We can do it with all kinds of things. Challenge the authority and back it up with data and use, things like this, where you can do things that AI can't do, like needlepoint and all those things, to be able to tell that particular story.
I think that that's a good time to transition to Dr. Brandeis. And one point that I want to bring up before that transition is, Anthony, when you said use data to challenge the authority, that's very much something that Du Bois did in the interest of protecting Black healthcare rights. Early on in the early 1900s, late 1800s, there was we all know about Prudential Insurance. They hired a statistician, Friedrich Hoffman, who wrote in such a way, like his statistical analysis concluded and was celebrated for highlighting and pointing out inferiorities among Black people. Is very eugenics was mainstream at the time. And this was a 330-page statistical tome, supposedly backing that up with evidence. But Du Bois and a colleague of his at Atlanta University, Kelly Miller, they did basically a causal analysis that showed that these conclusions that these so-called statisticians and high-minded individuals were putting out were not true, that their math was wrong, that when they controlled for things such as economics and various cities and locations and things like that, like if you're looking at these numbers completely in the aggregate, then you're going to get much different answers than if you start controlling for these other factors. But the challenge is, we're talking about early 1900s, like this kind of research was produced. But as I said in the beginning of the call, the vast majority of our machine learning methods are still based on that correlation versus the causation that Du Bois used to unseat that argument. So I think that's a perfect way to talk to Dr. Brandeis, who you saw both of her books on camera, on different cameras. This is about being able to develop and hold machine learning methods and models accountable. And we're going to get deeper into that. But to switch the step, Dr. Brandeis, can you tell us what, given your work with modern institutions and firms that are addressing issues around machine learning and AI right now, what can we learn from Du Bois?
What we learn is how much data is rooted in everything. Research is the key. The data is the data, and we have to make sure that we bring in context to that data. So W.E.B, with all of his infographics, with the way in which he displayed them, the way in which he ensured he had 10 categories, and he looked at different dimensions of Black people at the time and what that full story told. This is the way to do it. This is what institutions, organizations, enterprises today are struggling with when it comes to this AI era, is because it's so easy in order to create data, but the quality of it has been degraded. And the plethora of data does not mean that the data is accurate, doesn't mean the data has integrity, doesn't mean that the data is valid or reliable. And so we have to go back to basics. To your point, Chris, we have to go back to basics. What is the data? What is the routines and the algorithms that we are planning on using in order to validate and ensure that the data is trustworthy? He did not go to one source. He went to multiple sources. We have to do that. This is what modern organizations are contending with, is how do they know if a data and AI service is going to provide the feature that they need, and how do they integrate these different services? This is a complicated, intricate dance. It's an orchestration, really. And that's what I do. I tend to go into organizations. They're cross-functional teams because data touches every part of the business. And I'm over there as a conductor trying to understand what each part is doing, why they're doing it, and if they are integrating properly. And 9 times out of 10, they're not, because they're not talking to each other. They're in silos, data silos and AI silos. So what we need to continue to do, based off of how W.E.B. did his work, is to go back to fundamentals, to go back to how do we research? There is a scientific process and scientific method that W.E.B. did, right? As Allen said, he was a devout academic, and we need to get to that place where we are devout when we come to churning through the data, because the data is the root. The AI is the output. AI isn't the beginning. AI is the output.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to get in on another question I have for you. And this comes from, doing responsible AI and data ethics work myself, from questions that I often get from people. And so we all know, living in this world, that, AI continues to evolve really quickly, and such that even our very notion of what constitutes data has changed from spreadsheets to the notion of a digital twin, right? Something that represents you and your mind. And so some individuals and organizations are really feeling at a loss when it comes to developing their own ethical and responsible AI strategies that can really be living and dynamic enough to catch up with how everything changes and remain safe and equitable and careful. So what advice do you often give people who are in that place of wanting to introduce the kind of technology into their organizations, maybe for the first time, and what you would advise them to do?
Yeah, so the quick advice is document. There has to be a documentation chain. What does that look like? There has to be an ethos for it. There has to be KPIs and OKRs tied to documentation of your process. And please understand, documentation is not a one-off. It is a living evolution of process, right? So one person might start the document. Other people might be adding to that document process. Others will then look at that document in order to see if that process is really attached to and aligned with what's really happening in the organization. There has to be a review process for it and a maintenance and monitoring process for it. So yes, there needs to be documentation. Start with documentation. But on top of that, I think it's important to understand the landscape of how AI is coming into these organizations. It's 2 parts. So there's a top down and there's a bottom up. So bottom up tends to be individuals, team members who found a particular AI or data, a tool or service, and they want to use it. So they are introducing the tool inside the team and the organization. Then top down tends to be from the C-suite, and the C-suite is realizing they need AI, some type of AI adoption, or they believe they need it. And so they're putting a certain amount of directives around AI adoption, integration, and even understanding what an orchestration landscape would look like. And so this directive, this leadership is now telling people to use these AI services or these data services. So it's happening from both angles. In the middle is the middle managers who are now saddled with trying to execute. And there is not a lot of practice or policies around that. And this is what is complicated. This is what is has a lot of friction and a lot of tension around it. So my advice is really to start to bring in that documentation, and also to bring in what are the practices that your team members are using, and how is that aligned with what the leadership thinks they need inside the organization. Because what they think they need, they may not need, and what the team members are bringing to the table may not be what they need as well. So you really have to have external forces and external people to help march you through and guide you through what makes sense for your organization. Because to Chris's point earlier, depending on the industry, like healthcare, you have different regulations. There's different compliance rules that you have to consider. Whereas if you're on a startup side, you might not have those compliance, but you have to be worried about reputation.
I want to add a little bit to that, is that because Dr. Brandeis, whenever I commented on one of your posts, it's dangerous to go alone, take this. I saw that you reused that, so I'm going to reframe it. It's dangerous to go alone. And the reason I say that is, you have your initiative, like you've identified bias or issues in a certain process, but you want to work with other people on other teams that might better understand those KPIs and can help guide you in that way.
Yes.
So the next one that we want, and honestly, I'm going to steal some questions from the audience and throw them in here too, because like I saw some good ones, but I did want to just get a more direct framing about your work with these modern organizations and the types of questions they're coming to you with, and what types of solves you offer.
Yeah, so the type of work, it tends to be more on the external responsible AI and ethical data practice advising. And so this really looks at data strategy. So what is their data strategy within the organizations? FYI, they tend to not. And so I tend to try to help them identify what the needs would be of like a CTO or CIO, because they tend to not. And so, they have a lot of data, they store it in places, and they don't know what to do with it. So I try my best in order to provide services that make them understand how to vet what is good data and what is noise, because they are storing just data debris. That's what I call it. They're storing data debris. It's just they're spending lots of money to store things into the cloud that they don't need to. So I help in that. The second part I help with is really in responsible AI. If they're looking at adopting an AI service, what does that mean? So I ask about their database. I ask about what data would go into that system. I ask who is going to be owning the relationship, who is going to be adding to that data or AI service. What does it look like? So I really try to get into the strategy of what their approach is and then help them with execution. So I really try to partner with these teams. So I might be talking with a products team, and I tend to not talk to legal. Legal tends to not want to talk to me, but I tend to talk to the IT team. I tend to talk with HR and marketing teams and sales teams on how can they ensure that the AI tools that they're using them in ways that make sense. So really use case. So I really try to help them narrow down where they're using AI, and also try to provide them with, honestly, some like shamelessness. They like, oh, I use it for writing. Okay, that's fine. You can use it for brainstorming. Really? I can't? Yes, you can. So I probably like, it's okay to use it to help them build out their thoughts and help them work through their thoughts, but be transparent about when you use it. So I try to add that layer of how to be transparent. That's part of responsible AI, because responsible AI isn't necessarily policy. It's all about all those micro decisions that people across the organization are making in using the AI service, and then, of course, embedding it within their tasks. So that's what I do. But there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things that I do within organizations, but those are the high points.
I want to pull an attention here, which if you look in our audience, you see people that are embedded in the workforce and people that are coming to the workforce. Thank you, Boston University, NYU, and all that. But the tension that I see is, like you talked about, AI initiatives coming from top down versus bottom up. And I'm seeing a lot of pressure around mandates. Mm-hmm. Like we saw like Meta's token mandate, where there's a leaderboard where if you're not spending enough tokens, then you're coming under fire. Could you react to the pressures that people might feel around these mandates and what an actual ideal adoption strategy should look like?
Truth be told, the mandates aren't going to last long, in my opinion, because the productivity gain is not going to make sense. This is a AI hype race. And so my real suggestion is just hold on. Just do your best to hold on. I can't tell you how long it's going to take, but I can tell you, being in this industry for too many years that I want to count, that this will not last very long. It does not work with people. It never has. We can go back to manufacturing if we want to take this historical context, right? How often do we know cars being built in the early, 1900s and people losing limbs and fingers and things like that? And then eventually they had to institute an 8-hour workday, because originally it wasn't. When they had to institute child labor laws because they were using children, and it just did not work. So faster is not better. Using AI all the time is not better. That's my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, when you're in this space of these mandates are done because the leadership believes that AI is going to help their business. They're convinced of that. So the only thing you can do as an employee, as even middle manager, all you can do is provide them evidence of where it impedes, where it stops, where it costs them money. So then they can have the evidence to roll things back. And it can't be your idea. We all know this. If you're a middle manager, it can't be your idea. It has to be their idea, because they're in control. So so that's my suggestion. Another way to do it is to just not. But I'm more of a rebel, and I own my own business, so I can say that. You just kind of not. You just kind of say, okay, I'll get to it, and you just kind of always, yeah, I'm gonna try. It's hard. The process is difficult for me to embed AI in, and this is where I'm having challenges. Can someone help me? Especially if you're a lady, the damsel in distress move. Yeah, that can work. For a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'm sure for you for not very long, because we know you're not. But I just want to take a quick question from the audience. There's a theme kind of running in, and I want to pose that one to you before we move to the full panel. But there's this question around, data being open to interpretation, and how when we contextualize data in a society, like how do we add context to data in a society that's really only focused on the brief version. So, not really sitting with it maybe for as long as they should, or with the lens that they should, to understand and add the human experience back to it. What's your advice for that question?
Yeah, my advice is to talk to different people. My advice is to bring the data to people and go, hey, like, I saw this data and it's being messaged this way. Is this accurate? Like, is this right? Like, I see the sources and I'm not sure if the sources are right. So you come in with curiosity. And I think when people are curious, they then are less defensive. You don't come in with a statement saying this is wrong, because that's very polarizing. But if you come in with curiosity, you lean in with curiosity, that can be a disarming mechanism in order to now have a discussion. And then other people will see it and kind of go, well, yeah, like, I'm kind of wondering, I'm kind of going down this like a little bit of rabbit hole. And it's 5 minutes. It's a 5-minute rabbit hole, because that's all it takes when it comes to AI slop. And when it comes to, data debris, 5 minutes max in like one person. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're going to ignore this, or we're not going to weight it as much, because that also happens inside of algorithms. So that's just a very quick way in order to disseminate things. Now, if you're in a silo and you got to make the decision, this is when you need to reach out and have communities outside of your workplace in order to have these conversations. So I know Reddit exists, but Reddit is
Reddit is Reddit.
Reddit. I'll say it that way. So I do want to make a plug for Unaiable Society, which I lead and run. You can go to my LinkedIn in order to get more information about Unaiable Society. But that's a space, almost like a think tank space for data and AI experts and just enthusiasts that have questions, that are curious and want to engage in these conversations on a regular basis. And so you need to have a space where you can go to.
That's powerful. There's two big community spaces outside of this Reclaim movement, this little baby movement we're just starting, but the Unaiable Society and the Du Bois Challenge. Again, it's dangerous to go alone, so y'all have two resources you can go to find other like-minded people and work together. But in the spirit of working together, we want to bring everybody to the panel, to the screen, and ask a question. Like, it's still open for audience questions, but we wanted to kind of center on this overall question, which is, what do AI systems need to understand about communities to act with care about what information they should not have access to? So the simple version of that question is, how can AI leaders and companies start taking community input into what they're developing so that we're focusing on the people we're building for rather than just big, vague VC goals?
Let's start. I mean, I think that involves what we, in the industry we call socio-technical committees, meaning we're including different walks of life, not just people who are in the tech space, but also the community, to your point, who's being impacted by AI. And so, just plugging Dr. Marshall's book, like, we need to bring the humanity back into AI and into tech. And that's just, there's so much to say about that. But yeah, just bringing that humanity back and the lived experience, not just looking at the measured experience or, in our society, American society, where we're like quick to market, whereas we need to be more thoughtful about society in terms of its impacts. How we get there, I'll leave it to Dr. Marshall. I'm joking. I leave that to all of us. We leave it to all of us, not just put it on her.
Yes, please don't put it just on me, because it is an everybody accountability infrastructure, right? There's certain things that are part of the digital space, and there's certain aspects that do not need to be part of the digital space. And I think making that distinction is important, and having those discussions about what is digitized and what is not digitized, and bringing the people's side of things into it. Because the human AI judgment is where we need to get better at. We need to not just let the machines run amok. Because remember, the machines were built by humans. So the machines can never outpace the humans, because the humans are always going to evolve faster than the machine. I don't care what anybody tells me. I'm tech. I got my PhD in computer science. I know all about the algorithms. The algorithms are not that sophisticated. There's just more parameters, there's more levers to be pushed, there's faster hardware systems, but our brain and the way that we contextualize and can backtrack and can change our minds is something that is distinctly human, right? And it will always be distinctly human.
I was just going to quickly interject. I think, and those are two more points too, I think there needs to be more education in society about the limitations of AI. Dr. Marshall was also, what she kind of prompted for me was that to remind everyone that the algorithm does not have empathy. It doesn't think on its own. It's a program. And so I think if people had that caveat, they may have a slightly different viewpoint of how powerful they think AI is.
Let's, I'm just going to call her out. Layla Adu Gilmore. I've been wanting to get to your question, which she hit me with the framing here, which she is a musician, and she says, I'm curious on if anybody has information on Black intellectual property in artificial intelligence. As a musician, and knowing that Du Bois wrote on music, just curious about the impact of how Black intellectual property is being consumed. I have some thoughts here, but I want to put it to the panel.
I guess I will chime in. We're almost at time. I don't know if I have enough time to answer this question.
Sorry.
Maybe we might need to go offline to the person asking it. I go back to Prince. Prince said it back in the 90s when he was trying to get out of his contract and all that. Since you are a musician, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those that don't, just go back and understand why Prince was no longer called Prince. Okay, so I will say that for Black musicians, there is an erasure and a co-opting that has happened. We have seen it when it comes to Iranian War, the Lego videos. We've seen it. This conversation is all about loving Black culture, but not loving Black people. And so there has been erasure in music. How to protect yourself is an offline conversation. There's certain ways in order to better protect your music and better protect your artistry. But just know that there is a full-on understanding from a lot of people who are music heads, music buffs like me, who see the copyright infringements that's consistently happening, as well as the likeness and the voice of Black people. And our voices and our culture and our innovation and our blueprint is being used and monetized in ways that should not be. I didn't answer your question because it's a longer conversation, but great question, heard, and plus 1,000.
So we do have less than 2 minutes left, but I want to just put one thought in here, which I hope gives you agency over the future of music. And that is, imagine if an algorithm was only trained on music up to 1970. So all the pop and everything like that, classical and all that. So you train that algorithm. Does it then generate hip hop? Does it create hip hop? So you are in control of the new and next paradigms and future. But leaving off on that, Kara, I know we so excited to have everybody. We got to round this out, sadly. We'll be back, but we got to round this out.
Yes, absolutely. It's sad to cut things off now because I still want to hear from all of you about more topics. But I just want to thank our panelists again. Thank you so much for bringing all of your expertise, knowledge, and passion to this conversation today. Keep doing the work, and we'll keep following you. Thank you to our audience for your questions and your engagement. Again, to our community partners for your support of this work. We really would love for everyone on the call to stay involved with Reclaim the Algorithm. So please, we'll add you to, of course, a list where we'll send more events. But if you're interested in being a community partner, don't hesitate to let us know. And stay tuned for future webinars and events. We hope the work of W.E.B. Bois and our panelists motivates you with the feel you need to reclaim the algorithm. And we will see you next time.